Right, and you know what the other thing I did was I made a list. I made a list of everything, and look, as I've mentioned before, I've been in telco at this point 16 years, 17 years when I first started the business. And I love the industry, absolutely love it. But there's a lot of things wrong in the industry. It's like everything, right? There's positives and negatives to everything. So what I did was I sat down and I actually made a list. Here's all the pros, here's all the cons of everything in telco. And basically what I did, and it kind of became this little, I don't want to say mantra, that sounds a bit wanky, but it just became this thing that I did where I looked at it and going, okay, well, these are all the things that I'm not happy about in the industry that I don't think make sense, that I think are anti everybody, really. And so I made this list and I just decided I'm going to do the opposite. So do the opposite kind of became my thing. I looked at, this is the standard, these are the norms, let's do the opposite. And I guess the two biggest ones for me were sales targets and salesperson intent. Look, sales targets for me were, and I rarely had, with the exception of the job I had previous to starting Aria, where I didn't hit a sales target in 9 months and it was a complete fucking failure. And I'll probably speak more about that in a later podcast, but just to give you some context on it. But look, other than that, I'd never had an issue with hitting sales targets in my career. My issue with them wasn't that they exist and that you get bonuses paid if you hit your sales targets and what have you. The core issue with it is actually the mentality shift that it puts on the salesperson and trickles down quite rapidly to the client. And I've told this story 1,000 times, but the amount of times you get to let's say you've got a $10,000 sales target, right? And you've been working hard, you've been doing what you can, but things just haven't been quite getting there. You've got a bunch of deals in the pipeline. You're hoping some will come across. You're pushing for some to come across by the end of the month. So 2 reasons, really. Number one is you want to hit your sales target. You want to get paid your commissions or your bonuses. That's why salespeople do the job. They want to be hitting their targets. They love their bonuses. That's what salespeople are all about a lot of the time. And number 2 is if you miss the target, you don't really want to have that very uncomfortable conversation with the sales manager. And I've had it many times myself. I've had to give it many times when I was a sales manager, and it's not pleasant on either side. Even when I was a sales manager, I hated having those meetings with sales reps that miss their target. And it's not always a bollocking. It's not always, what the fuck have you done this month? It's more, my approach was more, look, okay, talk me through it. What actually happened? Where did we go wrong? What can we learn from this? And look, and eventually if somebody is missing their target for a number of months in a row and just not performing and not putting in the activity and the effort to get there, and you've got to have a little bit more of a serious conversation as a sales manager. But it's a horrible conversation to have, especially when you've got the pressure coming from above as well, that you're, as a sales manager, you're reporting to your management or to the board or to the CEO or to whoever you're reporting to. And if your team's not performing, then you're having the same conversation with them. So, as a sales manager, you've got the pressure to get your team to perform. Otherwise, you're in that position as well. So, and you don't get your bonuses and you have to have the conversation. So, but look, the reason people want to avoid that, and it's an old Tony Robbins thing, right? Where people will do 100 times more to avoid pain than they will to go towards pleasure. So you can put a $1,000 bonus or a $5,000 or a $10,000 monthly bonus on the board if somebody hits their target. Unfortunately, that's not as much of a driver as I don't want to have that conversation with the sales manager for most people. And the problem that I found with it was, other than the conversation with the sales manager, it changes the mentality of the sales rep. Let's say you've got your $10,000 target. We're sitting on the 28th of the month. I need to hit another $3,000 in 3 days, 2.5 days, to hit my sales target. Otherwise, I miss my commission and I get a bollocking from the sales manager. What do you think that does to a salesperson's focus? Is their focus on the client at that point, or is their focus on themselves? Right, and this is the core issue that I have with sales targets. It's not that they're inherently evil because we don't want to, or because, you know, people need to be paid bonuses for hitting a number. Like, that side of it is fine. Hit a number, get paid a bonus, don't care, right? It's the other side of it, of what actually happens when you're close to or not hitting your target. More close to, I guess, because that's when it really changes the mentality. If you're sitting on $2,000 at this stage in the month, and a lot of the time, and the term sandbaggy comes up, and it's true. I've done it. I know loads of people that have, and it happens. You sandbag your sales for the next month because, you know, well, this month's fucked. I'm not going to hit my target this month. I may as well. Anything that comes in the next couple of days, I'll just hold it for a day or two, and I'll put it in on the 1st or the 2nd of next month, and it'll look great. It's a great start to the month, and this and that. So, look, that happens too, but it's more when you're close, right? You're close. You know that you've got enough in your pipeline to be able to get, if just one of these clients signs, I've got like 6 clients and I'm still working on for this. If one of them signs or 2 of them signs, then I'm going to get, it just changes the focus. And I didn't want my clients to have to deal with my short-term metrics. It's none of their, like, what do they care? What do my clients care whether or not I hit a sales target or not? Like, they want what's best for them. They don't want what's best for me hitting my sales target, but unfortunately that's what happens a lot of the time in sales, is that the client ends up getting screwed or sold something that isn't necessarily right for them. That's why you've got dickheads running around selling 5-year contracts on phone systems, right? A 5-year contract on a fucking phone system. Are you kidding me? And look, this is coming from somebody, I'm not just bagging out I've got the complete ability across multiple networks, including my wholesale products, to sell 5-year contracts if I wanted to, and I never will do it. And anybody that comes into my business as a salesperson that even gives a hint of wanting to sell a 5-year contract is going to be told very quickly, no, it's not happening. And I'm being nice about this. But look, there's no benefit to a 5-year contract. The whole thing that salespeople push for 5-year contracts, and you'll find it as a client, if any, and I've said this 1,000 times, and I'll say it another 1,000 times until it sinks in. If a sales rep approaches you and the first offer that they give you on the table for a phone system is a 5-year contract, they're not thinking about you. They're just not, right? They're thinking about themselves, what they can sell, and what they can get the most amount of commission out of you for. And this is the thing, right? Salespeople will use the argument that the longer you sign, the cheaper it gets, right? And there's contracts out there that you can sign for 2 or 3 years that blow the hell out of the 5-year contract just on price. And this is what they're selling. They're pushing the 5-year contract, saying it will be cheaper for you to sign a 5-year than a 3-year contract. And actually, most of the time, they don't even mention the 3-year contract unless they can't get the person to sign on a 5-year contract. Like, this is the whole mentality of sales targets that pisses me off, right? This is where it annoys me, is you get these salespeople that, and it's not even the salesperson's fault. I got trained to do it this way. I just looked at it and said, fuck off, right? After a few years, I did it at the start because I didn't know any better. But when I actually sat down and actually looked at it, there's no way I'm putting somebody on a 5-year contract. Are you kidding me? Right? And so this is why the longest contract I will sell on a phone system is 3 years. Right? And, you know, many times it's less than that. It can be 2 years, and whatever is in the best interests of the client, but also allows me to run my business and support them. And that's where the disconnect is with a lot of people, is that they just think, I just need to make as much money out of this client. I don't really care whether this client signs again in 5 years' time, because chances are I won't even be working for this company in 5 years' time. I'll be off doing something else. So they don't give 2 shits. They just want their commission and they move on. And so that's why and I know I've gone on about this a little bit, but I'm just so visceral when it comes to sales targets for these reasons that it just does my head in, and I don't understand why. Well, look, I do understand why companies feel like they need sales targets, right? You need to know whether or not your sales team are performing, and the easiest way to tell is give them a number that you've come up with and you feel is somewhat accurate based on whatever metrics you're using, and let them run with it, and either they're hitting their number or they're not. And so that's where it comes up with. I, from day one of starting this business, have not had a sales target in my business. No monthly target, no quarterly, no annual, no nothing. And again, it comes back to the focus of what are you looking at? Are you looking at long term or are you looking at short term? If all you care about is monetizing every fucking person you see, and you just want to make the most money and bugger off, and you don't really care what happens, then go and put sales targets in place, chase them, do what you got to do them. I just don't feel like it's the right thing for my clients, and I don't think it's the right thing, the right attitude to have to grow a business in the long term. Having said that, am I grateful for the fact that every other fucker in telco acts like this? Absolutely. I love it. It's the amount of people the amount of clients that I've been able to win just by giving a shit about what is actually right for them versus what is right for me is unbelievable, because they've all been screwed and they come to me or they get introduced to me or whatever it is to fix whatever fuck up has happened, and whatever, I'm paying. I had one once, right? This is one of my existing clients, and obviously I'm not going to mention who it is, but I've got a client that right now is paying $700 a month for a 250 meg data link. When I came across that client, they were paying $800 a month for a 20 meg data link. And look, and I appreciate pricing has come down over the last X amount of years, but they looked at that and they've gone, well, okay, so we're getting a 12 times better speed and we're still saving $100 a month. Yep. That's it. That's what it is. It's right. And I could have gone to them and I probably could have sold them that same 250 meg service for $1,000 a month. I probably could have. And I right now would have been sitting here making an extra $300 a month off of a client for doing nothing different, not servicing them any better, not giving them a better connection, and none of that. And I'd be sitting here making an additional $3,500 a year for nothing. Because I would have had the leverage there of saying, well, you're paying $800 for a 20 meg service. How about we give you a 250 meg? Because they wanted to increase their speed anyway. But look, because it's so much more, it's going to cost you a little bit, it's going to cost you a couple of $100 a month more. They would have signed. I would have got that deal. But it's not the right thing for the client. And this is basically my whole point with this is when you're setting up a business, look at it on day one. What is your focus? Is your focus going to be, and what my focus was long term. I want to build a relationship with clients. I want to do the right thing by my clients, build a relationship with them for the long term. Do you know how much time I spend working with my clients where I don't actually bill out my time and fixing issues and fixing this and fixing that and putting out this fire and doing that, and I almost never bill out my time for that. And I've had this conversation because I do a lot of networking, and again, we'll get into that at a later podcast, but because I do a lot of networking, I've had this conversation 100 times where, look, and I spend probably 15 to 20% of my week working on new deals, new business, new sales, potential new clients. The remainder of my week, other than the networking activity and the stuff that you kind of have to do as a business owner in the background, is working with my existing clients, right? I had a client recently, a couple of weeks ago, where they were in the process of moving a bunch of their services, their mobile services across. And it is a not-for-profit organization, And so instead of saying to them, here's the SIM cards, get them out to your people, and once you've got them out there, let me know and we'll get the numbers sorted for you. Instead of doing that, I said to them, send me a list of all of the different, there's 28, 29 different places around Perth. Send me a list of all of the places where these users are. Give me the phones themselves, because they were all getting new phones with the SIM cards in them and all of that sort of stuff, whatever software they needed loaded up. I will personally, and we're doing like, I spent a day and a half, nearly 2 days doing this. I will personally drive around to each of those different sites, hand them their new phone, get them to sign a document to say, yes, I've received this, and take their old phone back, and then drop all the old phones back to the head office. Right? Was that a good use of my time in the short term? Probably not. It took me a day and a half or so worth of my life to go and deliver these phones, but was it the right play for me in the long term? Because I made the client's life easier, and I just entirely removed the friction out of them thinking, how the hell are we going to get these in our users' hands? We're going to have to get everybody to come into the office and pick up their new phone and give the old phone in, so it's going to take them 2 hours out of their life to come in and pick up the phone and get the new one out there, in which time each site isn't going to have a working phone on site, so there's a risk there. And that's why I said to him, look, let me do it. I will do it for you. I will go and do this. And this is the sort of, and I did not charge them 1 cent, not 1 cent for my time. And I took a full day and a half. I don't, the petrol, whatever, I don't care, right? Half a tank of fuel, who gives a shit, right? But I did not charge them 1 cent for my time to do that. I barely made a phone call during that time that was sales related. I didn't do anything really during that time other than drive around and drop these phones off and pick up old phones, right? But it goes back to, what is your focus? Is your focus going to be short term, where you're going to look at something like that and go, Rob, you're a fucking idiot. Why would you waste a day and a half driving around, like, you're a moron. You could have spent all of that time reaching out to, or are you going to look at that and go, shit, okay, he went to that extent to keep his client happy and make sure that the right thing was done by his client, rather than just worrying about his own ass. Like, that's the difference. I guarantee you there's 3 or 4 companies that I've worked for in the past where if I said to them, I'm going to take a day and a half out of my week to go and drive around to 30 different places and drop off phones and pick up, no, I would have been slapped purple for even suggesting doing that. But as a business owner, you don't have that worry. You can just go, okay, well, this is how I want to run my business. This is what means more to me. My long-term focus means more to me than any short-term metrics. So I'm going to do what's right for the client, and I'm going to make sure that that client is comfortable and they're taken care of. What do you want to do? Do you want to build a business for the long term? Do you want to build something for legacy, or do you just want to make a bit of quick cash and bugger off? If you want to make a bit of quick cash and bugger off, I guarantee you haven't even heard me say this line, because you would have turned this off long ago. You probably wouldn't even be listening to this episode after the first one. So hopefully, just by natural attrition, I'm only speaking to the people that actually want to look at growing a business for the long term and aren't just interested in short-term cash flow, because they're not the ones that I feel like are going to get the value from this podcast anyway. Like, what value am I going to be able to offer you if all you're worried about is short-term metrics? Almost nothing I say is going to give you any value at all. Once you've got everything else in place that we spoke about in the previous podcast, in episode 1, the next thing is get your agreements in place with whatever it is that you're going to be selling, right? Are you going to be selling security? Are you going to be selling insurance? Are you going to be selling phones? Are you going to be, whatever it is, right? Get the agreements in place so you can actually go and sell a product, because there's no point opening on day one if you don't have those agreements in place. As I say, what I did, I made a list. I looked at everything I love in telco, and I implemented that. I look at everything that I didn't like in telco, and I did the complete opposite. So no sales targets, long-term focus versus short-term focus, and just always doing what's right for the client, regardless of how it impacts me in the short term, or even to the point in the long term financially. There's deals that I've walked away from that I could have signed, but it wasn't right for the client, so I suggested they go elsewhere. And it just comes back to, what is your focus? So as long as you're clear on that, and look, it's the whole Simon Sinek start with why, right? Why are you doing this? Which actually is another book that I would suggest reading. I've read the book a couple of times. It is a great book, and I've watched a bunch of his content on YouTube, and he's brilliant. I can't recommend that highly enough. So that goes into the education that we were talking about in the first episode. But start with why makes a lot of sense, right? Why are you actually doing this? What is it you want to achieve out of it, and why? Like, are you doing it short term versus long term? As long as you're clear on that, you can work out the rest as you go. And you'll understand from this podcast series as we go on, you'll understand how little I realized that I knew at this point in the journey. Like, essentially day one, I knew fuck all. I really did. And I look at, even sitting here right now looking at, I've got a whiteboard in front of me with a bunch of different things that I want to talk about over the next X amount of episodes, however long this takes to go through. And just a brainstorming exercise of putting everything onto that whiteboard, even that blew my mind. Was like, wow, okay, there's a lot on there that I'd completely forgotten about, that I didn't even know. And yeah, you learn as you go. It's just get in there, do the work. You'll work it out as you go along, but just start. Just do the work. It's what it is. There's no substitute for putting in the hours, right? There just isn't. Now, there's an argument for, am I putting in the hours doing the wrong thing? And am I going to spend 1,000 hours doing the wrong thing and go completely in the wrong direction? And there's an argument for that. My argument to that is, if you're self-aware to know it's not going to take you 1,000 hours, right? It's back to the sales target argument, where the reason I don't have sales targets and the reason I won't have sales targets in my business, if you're a business owner and you can walk onto your sales floor, into your sales team, if you need a sales target to know whether or not your team is the right team, I just find that a huge vulnerability. Like, really? You need a number on the board to tell you whether or not this person is a good member of the team and worth keeping around? Right? I mean, I've just said I'm essentially the only salesperson in this business at this stage. Right? Even 3 years in. And I've got a couple of resellers and what have you, but they're not in the business. So I'm essentially the only salesperson. The amount of time that I spend not doing sales related stuff, that in the short term makes no sense, but in the long term is invaluable, is amazing. And I understand if you employ somebody specifically for a sales related role that you want them doing sales, that makes sense. But it's, do you want them to be doing sales for the next 6 months until you replace them when they have a couple of shit months and then you piss them off and get somebody new? Or do you want them doing sales for your business for the next 5 years, 10 years? Because it's a different mentality. I know when I start bringing salespeople into this business, and I've been against it for the longest time, and you can ask John Hardy, my business coach, ask him, he'll tell you, I've been against having a salesperson in the business for the longest time because of the sales mentality of just, they're going to go around and they're going to grab every piece of business they can, and they don't really, so when I've changed my stance on this now, and this is what I was talking about. You'll work stuff out, you'll evolve. I will at some point bring salespeople into my business, but they're going to be trained, to my mind, right. They're going to be trained to put the customer first. Not every second of the day needs to be devoted to being on the phone or being in a meeting. It just doesn't. As long as they're doing things that are going to be in the best long-term interest. This is... I don't even know I want to go through this now. This is why I failed in my last role before I started Aria. Because I was doing behaviors that long-term were going to work. Short-term, no. I fucked up. I didn't hit my sales targets, and they weren't even large, massive, over-the-top sales targets. The behaviors that I was doing were more suited to a long-term plan than a short-term plan. And I guarantee you, had I still been there today, 3 years later, that I'd be smashing it right now, because everything that I was putting into place would have been coming through. That's why Aria as a business is going well right now, because I didn't change anything from what I was doing with that business to what I was doing when I started Aria, other than the fact that I was in control and I'd removed the sales target mentality, and I was able to do those long-term behaviors without getting a bollocking for not hitting sales targets. That the actual behaviors themselves didn't change. And so I've got no doubt whatsoever that it would have easily, if I was still there now, I would have been killing it.